Kate, don't go there. Lady acting is illegal. Besides, girls can't act, just as they cannot practice law, cure the sick, handle financial matters, or stand for any office.
No woman has ever been allowed to try any of those things.
Because they can't do them. God's bodkins, Kate. What's not to get?
My name is Doll Piccotto, and this is Bard Talk. One of the running gags in the Shakespearean BBC comedy, Upstart Crow, is that of poor Kate, the landlady's daughter, and her fervent desire to act in one of Shakespeare's plays. She is constantly begging him to cast her in his teen romance play or his big donkey gag play, only to be reminded that lady acting is illegal, and he gives her a myriad of reasons for it. Everything from it is illegal for girls to do anything interesting to men are better than women by law, so it must therefore follow that they must even be better at being women. This, of course, is based on the historical reality of Shakespeare's time. It is common knowledge that women did not perform on the public stage. What is not common knowledge is there seems to be no concrete evidence that it was actually illegal. Professor Emma Smith of Oxford University lectured, "There is no formal prohibition. There is no legal problem. It seems to be one of those cultural norms that's so ingrained that nobody needs to tell anyone to do it, and nobody needs to challenge it." So, what were these cultural norms that made it so clear to Shakespeare's stage that women were not allowed on it, not even to play roles depicting their own gender? Although there are many factors which contributed, today we're going to explore two arenas that certainly contributed: how Elizabethans viewed the theater and how Elizabethans viewed women. Now, the reputation of the Elizabethan theater was not the golden one that we give it today. In fact, the overwhelmingly predominant image associated with the theater at that time was prostitution. This came about for many reasons, the most obvious being geography. The theaters were located outside London proper, across the Thames in the less savory areas, the same areas that hosted bear baiting, cockfights, and most significantly, brothels. The famous Globe Theater is only a hop, skip, and a jump from a celebrated brothel called Holland's Leaguer, and many puritanical folks considered the theater to be merely an annex of the brothel. There were prostitutes in the audience watching the plays. There were ladies plying their trade outside the theater doors. And during plague times, both institutions had to be shut down as social distancing issues of both trades encouraged the spread of the disease. One can understand how the theater building and the events there became associated with prostitution, but this is still not the same as seeing the act of acting as prostitution itself. However, the fear of infection from these institutions began to extend from the physical corruption of the body to the moral corruption of the soul. In the eyes of the Puritans, the spectacle of seeing an actor in fine costumes displaying himself on stage was no different than the spectacle of a prostitute strutting her stuff outside the theater. And watching these actors performing staged representations of love and lust was considered just as bad as committing the act itself. It was written, "Few men or women come to plays and resorts of men with safe and chaste minds. Those filthy and honest gestures and movings of the interlude players, what other things do they reach than wanton appetites and desires?" It was considered voyeurism, and the fact that the women were played by men often made it worse. The Puritans believed, "He that looketh on a woman and desireth to have her, he hath committed adultery already in his heart." When the her is actually a him, it's an extra Puritan problem. The actor performs sensual services tempts the eye, seduces the senses, entices you with romantic and lustful stage play, and you, as a customer, pay for it. The prostitution analogy is pretty convincing. So now let's look at our second arena, how Elizabethans viewed women. Women in Elizabethan times were considered weaker, both physically and psychologically, to men. Prevailing medical beliefs of the day held that women were essentially incomplete men, that a lack of heat in the womb during pregnancy prevented the development of male organs. So, since they were essentially undeveloped, women were in need of supervision by men, the completed sex. Women were expected to be chaste, silent, and obedient, and even Queen Elizabeth I spouts this to Parliament. The weight and greatness of this matter might cause in me some fear to speak, and bashfulness besides, a thing appropriate to my sex. Yes, even Queen Elizabeth, Gloriana herself, believed and enforced the idea that women were subservient to men. Now, of course, she was more than a woman, as she was ordained to the throne by God. She famously said, "I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England, too." But it was definitely to her advantage to make sure her male parliament knew they were superior by nature. She was just a special case. Regular women were under extreme pressure to conform to societal norms. They should be subservient, homebound, quiet, and focused on providing a home for their husband and children. Contrast this image with that of stage performers. If a woman was to go on stage and play a role, it was tantamount to admitting she was a prostitute, a fallen, disgraced woman, and therefore of no value in society. Acting was the exact opposite of the Elizabethan expectation for women. It was associated with lewdness, prostitution, indecency. It wasn't until King Charles II required that all female roles be played by women that a woman was required to appear on the London stage. The first woman to play Shakespeare on the London stage played Desdemona in 1660, one of the most virtuous Shakespearean characters there is. However, those ideas about women and the theater were still so deeply ingrained in the minds of the audience that the theater felt the need to write a prologue to prepare the audience for what they were about to see and to convince them of the virtue of their actress. Thomas Jordan penned, "I come unknown to any of the rest to tell you news. I saw the lady dressed. The woman plays today, mistake me not, no man in gown or page in petticoat. A woman to my knowledge, yet I can't, if I should die, make affidavit on't. Oh, do you not twitter, gentlemen? I know you will be censuring, do it fairly though. 'Tis possible a virtuous woman may abhor all sorts of looseness and yet play on the stage where all eyes are upon her. Shall we count that a crime France calls an honor? In other kingdoms husbands safely trust 'em. The difference lies only in the custom. And let it be our custom, I advise. I'm sure this custom's better than the excise, and may procure us custom. Hearts of flint will melt in passion when a woman's in't. But gentlemen, you that as judges sit in the star chamber of the house, the pit, have modest thoughts of her. Pray, do not run to give her gifts when the play is done, with damn me, your most humble servant, lady. She knows these things as well as you, it may be. Not a bit there, dear gallants. She doth know her own deserts and your temptations too. But to the point. In this reforming age, we have intents to civilize the stage. Our women are defective, and so sized you'd think they were some of the guard disguised. For to speak truth, Men act that are between 40 and 50, wenches of 15, with bones so large and nerves so incompliant, when you call Desdemona, enter giant. We shall purge everything that is unclean, lascivious, scurrilous, impious, or obscene. And when we've put all things in this fair way, Barebones himself may come to see a play. Barebones in that stanza refers to, praise God, Barebones, a famous, ridiculous, holy man of Shakespeare's day. He was, in fact, a real person. But here we finally have some legality for women on stage. It is now required for women to play women's roles, yet society is still having trouble accepting the idea of the virtuous woman as actress. Actresses began to represent themselves in programs and posters with the title Mrs., even if they weren't married, in an attempt to give themselves a veneer of respectability. They began to really attempt to distinguish themselves as serious actresses, challenging established stage ideas and revolutionizing the theater, pushing envelopes and playing challenging roles. Unfortunately, these attempts did little to change the audience view. Women on stage were viewed mainly as objects of sexual titillation, and costumes began to be designed to be more revealing. Rape scenes in plays became very popular. Also popular were breeches roles for women. Shakespeare wrote many of these roles where young women dress up like young men. For example, Viola in Twelfth Night. Since he already had young men playing these roles, it made sense for him to create these roles. The young men would look like convincing young men. Having women play these roles breathed new life into these Shakespearean heroines. But unfortunately, even with the new life breathed into them, these roles became popular for a different reason. Male audiences were treated to a view of the actress' shapely legs. In fact, many theater owners began to rewrite Shakespeare's plays to get more cross-dressing and more scantily clad characters on stage. So even though women were making valiant strides to change societal perceptions and be seen as the serious artists they were, change was slow, and societal perceptions deeply ingrained. They still are. In 1975, Dame Helen Mirren was on the long-running British talk show Parkinson. She was a 7-year member of the RSC, had played several leading Shakespearean ladies, and was preparing to play Lady Macbeth. She was ready to chat about her rising career when Michael Parkinson, the host, introduced her as a sex queen and quoted, "She is especially telling in projecting sluttish eroticism." Dame Helen Mirren was welcomed on stage by someone announcing to the audience that she makes a very convincing whore. Just a few years ago, during an interview for an Avengers movie, Robert Downey Jr. was asked what he learned from playing Tony Stark. Immediately after, Scarlett Johansson was asked what she ate to keep in shape and if she wore any underwear under her Black Widow costume. Clearly, we've got a ways to go. Those cultural norms run deep. So the next time, or the first time, you see an all-female Shakespeare production, remember, it's not just a gimmick. It's an overthrow of centuries of societal norms and expectations. It's an affirmation of the power of female acting and storytelling. It's cross-dressing. Just another great Shakespearean tradition in action. But above all, it's a good play. Thank you for coming to my Bard Talk. And scene.